Lockett.
And we have a special guest with us today.
Hi, I'm Jacob.
So Jacob is here with us today to talk about Syracuse football.
Woo!
Good, so good to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Yes. We're so
Anytime.
excited to have you.
So Jacob, talk to us. What's been happening in these past 2 games with Syracuse? They haven't been performing as well as people hoped.
No, and it's been a tough off-season. Sort of had an abbreviated off-season with the pandemic, but that's been the case for every team. Every team has had to deal with coronavirus and not having spring football and having to implement plays and different schemes over Zoom. So yeah, they've had an uphill battle, but they're not unique. They have had a new offensive coordinator. His name is Sterling Gilbert. He joins them from USF. He joins them from USF. He coached at McNeese State last year, his first year as Syracuse's offensive coordinator. And it's been a rough go. They've had 2 games. They have kicked 3 field goals. They've scored 1 touchdown. They have 11 first downs, 3 interceptions, but guys, no wins. No wins yet.
No wins. And I was actually going to say, because Maya and I talked about this on our first episode, can they use the COVID-19 as an excuse at all?
They're going to try. Coach Babers has said that this is not a normal year, and of course it's not. But what I'm saying is, it hasn't been a normal year for anybody.
How long is too long to blame it on COVID? Like, do you think if COVID didn't happen, the team would...
It's already passed. It's already too late. But I think it's okay if you want to adjust your expectations as a fan. If your expectations going into the year was a bowl game, and they might make a bowl game because 2 conferences not playing, they might need everybody to play in the bowl game.
Well, actually, I don't know if you saw, Pac-12 actually announced that they are going to be playing this fall.
They are going to be playing. They're eyeing October as a...
So that throws a wrench in some other teams who thought that they could sneak in that top 25.
Right. Syracuse won't be in that top 25. There could be 26 teams. I don't think Syracuse would crack the top 25.
Top 50 maybe?
Top 50?
Is there
Sure.
hope for this year, do you think? What do you need to get together?
What are you hoping for? If you're hoping for young players to find their role, to really get acclimated with the new offense, to get comfortable and then be put in a great position for next year, then absolutely, there's hope. But if what you're hoping for is conference championships, bowl games, any sort of championship aspirations, then no, I don't.
Especially
think
when
so.
right now you have Clemson at number 1. Or
Yeah.
are they still number 1?
I would, yeah.
They're still number 1, and then they still have Trevor Lawrence, and that kind of...
Yeah, well, they were never going to hang with the Clemsons of the world. They could, in 2018 they went 10-3, and I think many did have high aspirations in 2019. But it's just been hard. They have a little bit of a quarterback battle going on right now, which is not something anybody anticipated coming into this season.
I think people are a little confused about what's happening. I think, at least in the first game, was Tommy hurt? Is that why Culpepper went in? Or, because I know the second game was because he got hit and he kind of was wobbly when he got up, but I'm not too sure about what happened the first game.
So Dino Babers has a handful of packages set aside for Rex Culpepper. They're mostly near the red zone. So he is a big, strong quarterback who they think can run and break a couple of tackles and get near the end zone. Obviously, that hasn't happened. What happened in the second game is, for back-to-back weeks, Tommy DeVito's been sacked 7 times. So that's 14 sacks in 2 games. At this rate, he'll be sacked an insane 77 times, which I'm not sure, but that definitely has to be a record.
That does not sound like a good future. For
No,
that.
that's not where you want to be.
You do not want to be there at all.
And that's a great point, and that's something worth talking about. What kind of future can he have if he's getting hit that many times?
Well, with the topic of CTE and just concussions in general and the health of football players after they play or after their lives after football, I'm saying after a lot, like it's a concern because this is a disease that you don't see until like the last bit of your life.
Absolutely, and as far as I know, Tommy hasn't had any problems with concussions, so thank goodness for that. I haven't heard anything's wrong with his head, but you know, the body can only endure so much. And you signed on for a season during a pandemic that already, being in close proximity with other players, you run the risk of shortening your life just by contracting COVID. So he was already, every player is already between a rock and a hard place, and him getting knocked around is just making things worse.
So do you think it's the O-line that they need to strengthen up that, or is it, like, what do you think?
Well, that's where it starts. That's where I would start, because it's not like there's anything going right with the offense, and it all runs through the offensive line. The quarterbacks don't have time to throw. The wide receivers don't have time to get downfield in their routes. Running backs don't have anywhere to run. And they are depending on 2 rookie running backs and an upperclassman to get by, but they've just not really had any help. And I think Coach Babers has said that you can break it up between 3 different groups. And I guess if you'd ask him, he would say that each group is equally responsible for the sacks. So he's going to say it's on the quarterback who's holding the ball too long. It's on the wide receivers who aren't getting open. It's also on the offensive line. But when you look at the run game, there's nowhere to run either. So if I had to place it, you know, at anyone's feet more than someone else's, I would say it's the O-line.
Are there any huge differences from the previous season from in the season?
Yes, they had a couple of guys that they had pegged to be starting running backs who decided to opt out. They had a big win in Chris Bleich, who played at the University of Florida and started 8 games playing offensive line for them, who transferred to Syracuse to be closer to his family in Pennsylvania. And the NCAA did not grant his waiver request. And if you guys don't know, there's a rule in the NCAA that if you transfer schools, you need to have that waiver approved if you want to play immediately.
So speaking of waivers, because we just had a basketball player, Alan Griffin, his waiver got approved. Do you feel as though, why do you think that the football player's waiver may have gotten approved, but the basketball player's waiver have gotten approved? Do you think it's because Syracuse is more of a basketball school?
I definitely think that's part of it. I think if you look at some of the players who are granted waiver requests, you know, Ohio State, Miami, Alabama, they never have any problems getting players to play right away. But Syracuse can't. And so I definitely think the preeminence of the program is a huge factor. What's also interesting in Chris Bleich's case is, and there's a great story on Syracuse.com written by Chris Carlson. Our boss, Mike McAllister, am I allowed to say that?
You're allowed to say that.
Okay. Our boss, Mike McAllister, also has a nice story on it on 247sports.com at Cuse Nation. So when Chris was playing at the University of Florida, he felt a pop in his hip before the first game of the year. And he went to team doctors, and they treated it with heat and ice, and they said, okay, you're good to go. And he basically played through pain for 8 games until fans started critiquing his performance because he was playing hurt. They said he was too slow, he was too sluggish. They finally replaced him with someone else, And that's when he decided he wanted to leave. And after he left, he would later find out that he had torn cartilage in both his hips, and he had something called a double sports hernia, which is, I guess, sports hernia 2 times over. I don't know. Sounds awful. So when Chris decided to transfer and he filed his waiver, he argued that he had been neglected at the University of Florida, that he wasn't taken care of, that they didn't have his best interest in mind. And so, understandably, when you make that kind of claim, when you file these waivers, the school that you're leaving has to sign off on it. And if they're getting something that says, hey, he says you guys basically neglected him and you're kind of bordering on malpractice, they're going to fight that tooth and nail. So if Chris had just said, you know what, I wanted to go somewhere where I was going to play, I don't think Florida would have had an issue with it. But because he was honest, I think he's being punished.
Do you feel like, because it seems like with football, just not even just college but NFL as well, that the word neglect is thrown around a lot, especially versus basketball, where we see how basketball players are treated on a consistent basis with just the bubble, or even when they are injured and how people take it seriously. But with football, it seems like they've been very careless with the pandemic and just neglected in a way.
And I think it's probably easier for football to get that perception just because of how violent a sport it is. You're not running, these guys are the fastest men on the planet, running 40, 50 miles an hour into each other without slowing down. They say it's, they're modern day gladiators. It's basically a blood sport. And for the longest time, they weren't looking out for the best interests of their health. And when you talk about college sports, it's a whole different can of worms because these guys aren't getting paid. And it is a health risk, even not in a pandemic, to strap on that helmet and walk out on that field. And they're not being compensated. So I think people who have a problem with the NCAA and football teams and say that they're not taking care of their players, I think they have a few good points.
So you bring up a good point with them being paid, but so I want to ask this. When Pac-12, Big Ten, they decided not to play, but versus the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, they decided to play. Do you think it was for the safety of their players or because they wanted to make the money that they usually do?
Each conference has different doctors and different experts that they listen to. So it is interesting. The Big Ten doctors said that it wasn't safe and that an overwhelming percentage of the people contracting COVID were also found with heart effects, and they didn't feel it was safe to play. Now, the ACC, Big 12, other conferences have determined that it is safe to play. So it's interesting. They all have the same information, which, to be honest, isn't a lot. It's still a brand new disease. But they're coming up with different answers. And it is a significant moneymaker. It's probably the chief moneymaker for these schools, particularly with the SEC and Big 12.
Just the Power 5 in general.
Right. So, you couldn't really sweep that under the rug.
I don't think it was, I don't want to say that and say the NCAA or these conferences only care about these money. They think they care about their players in a sense, but I think their first priority is let's get them on the field. We need that.
I mean, if money wasn't the number one priority, then they would be paying players. It's as simple as that.
I've always talked to different people about that topic with should college players be paid or not, and I always get different answers or always get the same answer just said to me different times. So you say that they should be paid, point blank period?
point blank period, when you look at the revenue that they make for these schools, they absolutely deserve, at the very least, a fraction of a percentage.
I totally agree that players should get paid, but do you think, different schools don't get as, they don't bring as much income as bigger schools like Syracuse or Duke? So how will they choose how to pay these players fairly?
Sure, the schools that make the most money would be able to afford to pay players the most. And so, that it wouldn't be a level playing field, because obviously schools like Alabama would pay way more than anybody else. But Alabama's already getting the best players in the country. It isn't a level playing field. And as we saw in college basketball a couple of years ago, there is under the table deals with players getting paid.
They just found a sneaky way to get them paid, and unfortunately they got in trouble for it. Whether or not you agree or disagree with that, that's up to everyone else. But I think people forget too, when they mostly talk about should athletes get paid, they're usually only thinking of football and basketball. And I'm like, well, what about Olympic sports like volleyball, lacrosse, baseball, soccer? What do they get? They would obviously, depending on the school, I don't know about any other schools, they would get paid significantly less than football or basketball players, especially women as well, because that's not as popular. So what do they do in that situation?
Yeah, that just seems like a whole different can of worms. I'm 99.99999% positive that a player in the NBA gets paid more than a player in the WNBA. I haven't done the research, but my gut tells me that's the case.
It's always definitely the case.
And, is that different play for equal work? It's a whole new discussion and debate, but, I think that's one good example, a professional example that you could look at and see how it might play out in college sports if that were to happen.
Also with men's and women's soccer, at least in terms of USA soccer, that they're advocating for equal pay, and I think they are still fighting despite them. It's different because the women have won 2 World Cups in the past 10 years versus the men who.
And they bring in more revenue.
Right.
That was proven.
They're the team to watch. Absolutely.
But when the men are on, all of a sudden everyone's watching. All people are like, oh well, they've made it. Blah blah blah. I was like, but they haven't won the World Cup. And
that's interesting, just because I think the tournament as a whole, it's probably the men's tournament internationally, the world over, is more watched, but the women's team in America is the better team.
Which isn't, I shouldn't say it's upsetting, it's weird because it's I think they should be both amazing, but you have the men's team just deteriorating at a fast rate. I don't watch soccer that much. My brother's more of a soccer fan than I am, and even then, as a whole, we're not a soccer family. But I do know that they're just not getting the players that they should, and yet you see the women, they're doing basically everything perfect. They're getting the players, they're getting the coaches, and they're doing their job. They're winning, versus the men, they haven't. So you have that.
Yeah, I just feel like you guys could spend a whole episode on this topic alone.
Okay.
But how many millions of cases are there where, someone who does an inferior job gets paid more money than someone else?
It happens too often.
It's countless.
Is what I can say.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this Saturday, Jacob.
Oh,
Syracuse.
I know. How excited are you to be one of the only people allowed in the dome, the Carrier Dome, for the first game with a new roof, just a new
But
vibe,
no fans.
But no fans.
No fans. It's going to be weird. So to provide a little background, I'm from Houston, a grad student, just like you guys. Moved here, I think, the day before school started. So I had to quarantine, and first 2 weeks of classes were all virtual. And, it wasn't until after I got out of quarantine that I could actually see the building from the outside. So I've never been inside. It's going to be my first time. It's a brand new roof, but everything's brand new to me anyways. So I don't know where I'm parking. I don't know how to get in the door. I don't know where the press box is, where the elevator is. It's all going to be very jarring, and then I'm gonna have to go to work.
Well, you were talking beforehand because I was trying to get credentials to go work the football game, but I didn't know what I was gonna do. I was just kind of like, okay, just put me there. I'll be a reporter. I don't know what I'll.
You'd wear a smart blazer.
I
You'd
would-
look the part.
I would look the part, but if they ask me, okay, you need a report, I'll just be like, report on what? I could tell you that they have scored whatever. Not that I can't do my job, because that's what I'm here to do. But it's like, what exactly? Because each network wants something different when it comes to sideline reporting. All the basic stuff, but then they want their own. So I wouldn't know what to do in that case. And I didn't get anything. So it's gonna be interesting to see what you do.
Exactly.
Yeah, we will see. I'm just gonna try to write as fast as I can. It's interesting. I'll be in the building, but the post-game press conference will be on Zoom.
Wow.
So I'll be in the press box on Zoom, probably sitting next to every other writer who's also in the Zoom room.
Connections. That's what you need to do while you're there.
Exactly.
Find those connections.
Maybe I need to get some business cards printed out.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll have fun. So, in regards to the team, they're playing Georgia Tech this week. I don't think Georgia Tech is ranked.
They are not ranked.
They're not ranked. So, do they have a chance, or what do they need to do to win this game versus Georgia Tech?
Well, I'll tell you what. This is probably their best chance to get a win this season outside of the non-conference Liberty game later on, which may or may not happen with COVID. But before the season, ACC media voted Georgia Tech to finish last place in the ACC, which is 15th, with Notre Dame being added in. And Syracuse was voted to finish 14th. So at the beginning of the year, we were supposed to be better. But coming into this game, somehow Georgia Tech is a 7.5, 8-point favorite on the road. And that might be because they've scored multiple touchdowns in both of their games. And we just have the one. Look, the Syracuse got a raw deal having to play 2 top 25 teams to start the year. In North Carolina, their quarterback Sam Howell was a bona fide Heisman candidate. He is a sophomore supernova quarterback prodigy. People are talking about him as being a future first-round draft pick. And that Syracuse defense played lights out for 3 quarters of that game. They got even better against Pitt. So this Syracuse defense under new defensive coordinator Tony White is the real deal. And they're playing against a freshman quarterback in Josh Gibbs, who will be taking snaps for Georgia Tech on Saturday. Gibbs has thrown 2 interceptions in each of his first 2 games, so he already has 4 picks. Despite the rough year Tommy DeVito's having, I think he only has 2 or 3 interceptions.
I think it was 2.
I think it's 2.
From Pittsburgh alone in that one game.
So he hasn't thrown as many interceptions as this guy. But he is a running quarterback. But, when you expect a guy to run, and not that he can't throw the ball, because he can, but, he's running, 15, 18 times a game. So I think the defense should be able to account for him relatively easily. If he does try to throw, the defense has been great at getting their fair share of takeaways. So I would look for that. They also had a rookie running back who had a great game in his first game last week. But when you look at the offensive weapons, not as much to worry about this week as they have in previous weeks.
So you said earlier that Babers has 2 plays for both Culpepper and DeVito. He has something set aside for Culpepper, right?
That's what he says. He does have packages. He gets him involved normally when they're in the red zone near the goal line, and he just thinks he's more of I mean, some of Syracuse's best plays have been DeVito scrambles when he's running for his life. But I guess he just likes Culpepper as more of a bulldoze kind of a runner. But in watching that game against Pitt, he had that great 69-yard touchdown, the only touchdown Syracuse has had. It's worth looking at. We've talked about the offensive line and how bad it's been, but Rex took at least a third of the snaps in that game and wasn't sacked once. Tommy DeVito got sacked 7 times. So what's happening there? I can't really explain it.
I think only the team knows that. But I was going to say, I talked about last week with Sam how I know Coach Papers knows what he's doing, and I don't want to question that whatsoever. But when Culpepper made the touchdown, that built momentum with the team. And then he puts DeVito in, which kind of stopped it because they had to kind of start all over again, which brings me to the question, like, is it a problem having 2 quarterbacks? Because different programs across the country have tried that, and I personally have never seen it succeed. So I just want to know, like, why do they do this? Is there, like, a method to that madness? Or...
The old saying is, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. You can't really get any sort of chemistry or consistency by constantly switching between 2 different quarterbacks. If you have one who is your guy to run the football near the goal line, that's fine. But to have 2 different guys taking 50% of the snaps just because you can't make up your mind is not helping the team. Now, if Rex Culpepper was a freshman or a sophomore who had 3 or 4 more years of eligibility, this would be an exciting year to see what he has, and you would get the chance to see what you have in the future, because this year is a free year. It doesn't count towards anyone's eligibility. But he's a senior, so he's not really going to be your future. I mean, he might stick around next year, but he's not the future of the program. So it's not like you have a wait and see and let's see what we have. But I just don't think DeVito's played well enough to keep his job and keep Culpepper on the sidelines.
Yeah, because I've seen this once before in my life. I don't know if you ever saw it when A&M, when Sumlin was still there, and he was using Kyler Murray and Kyle Allen. And what resulted in that year is they both left.
Right.
So I've seen that fail before, and I'm seeing this again, completely different team. And I'm like, is this going to happen again? Where they're like, I might not just come back, because like, it may not count towards my eligibility, but it's like, if this is going to be the case, why should I return?
You got to make up your mind. And I know I said at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the podcast, that shortened off season, it's kind of hard to figure things out. But you should have a pretty good idea of who your starting quarterback's going to be. Now, being a fan of the Houston Texans, I've seen Bill O'Brien go through an entire offseason saying Tom Savage is the starting quarterback, and then in the first half of the first game, he switches to Deshaun Watson because he didn't like the first 2 quarters. So, yeah, there have been coaches who have been indecisive in the past. And is it indecisiveness, or is Tommy just injury prone? I don't want to say injury prone, but he was obviously banged up. But I would not be surprised if you saw a little bit of a back and forth this week. Hopefully that's not the case the whole season.
Well, at least they chose a quarterback. We didn't know if we were going to pay ours. I'm a Cowboys fan, so. I'm sorry, are we going to go through this again? You don't have a team, okay?
I do have a team.
Who is your team?
The LA Rams. Duh.
You've been there for like how long? How long
It
is
doesn't
it?
matter. I'd rather.
Well, they do have a history there,
I'm a
but
Cowboy fan.
they are new. They have a new
They have
new
$5
facility.
billion.
Yes, it's
It looks like
beautiful.
it's
Make
like
sure you look it
Disneyland
up.
for football. Like, we gotta admit that.
What do you think of the new unis this year?
They look great.
I'm
Really?
personally one of the people who likes them.
Yeah, you really struggled through that. There's no way you like those uniforms.
You're struggling with that Rockets
I think
hat.
because they just
This is a great. I wish they would go back to this logo.
So I think they just kind of wanted to fit into the whole LA lifestyle where they're like new and fresh, and they wanted to put that through their uniforms. And I personally like them, but I know like
Wow.
it was-
Okay. No, I mean.
I know it's been like a trend that like they're not lights.
I would defer to you guys on fashion before I followed my own advice, but
And they're gonna get dirty either way, so it doesn't matter.
they're gonna get. Oh, I love that. They're just gonna get dirty. Why does it matter?
Because they're
what
white.
But white uniforms are the best uniforms. It's like when Syracuse
They
wear
are.
their white uniforms, they look great.
When the University of Texas wears their all whites, they're
I don't like you too.
it's fine. Their stormtrooper uniforms are pretty clean.
I liked A&M's icy uniforms. I don't know if you ever saw those.
The
They were
icy.
icy ones. They were all white. You could barely see the numbers, but they looked great.
Oh God, that would be terrible. I hope no one comes out in all white uniforms when I'm up in the press box.
I know. I think about that now because back then, like, I wasn't really into my journalism yet. So thinking about it now, like, wow, that must have been hard for like people up
It's
in the
the
press
worst.
box. Like, I can't.
It's the absolute worst.
What are the rules in the press? Do they give you any rules for the press box?
There are some rules. I've only been in the press box a couple of times, but it's kind of like being at a golf game. You know, people are trying to work, be quiet. Obviously, I'm rooting for Syracuse to win, but I don't think it's kosher to stand up and cheer whenever they get a first down or score a touchdown. So I will. It's not a place you want to watch the game. It might be a good view, but from a fan's perspective, you'd much rather be in the stands.
Well, we're taught now, at least that was what our professor said, like the first week, you are no longer fans, you are working for the team.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's upsetting because,
I take that with a grain of salt.
yeah, because we went into this with sports because
Well,
we
exact-
loved it, because we loved being a fan. We
Because
loved
when you stop being a fan, that's when sports becomes a job. And I think we all got into this because it didn't feel like work.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you try to turn it into a job? It was supposed to be getting paid to watch sports and cheer. So, yeah, maybe you keep that close to the vest most of the time, but I wouldn't hang it up, you know.
So for those who want to go into sports journalism,
Yeah.
let us tell you, you're not being paid to be a fan unless you're working for a team. I don't know what
That's true.
the exceptions. Unless you work for the Lakers someday, I don't think you can cheer for them if you work for Houston.
I think our professor Matt Park does quite a bit of cheering when he goes to work as the voice of the Syracuse Orange.
Well, that's kind of like his job in
well,
a sense. Like he's supposed
yes.
to get you excited
The
and
w-
like.
What's interesting with that is absolutely you better stand up and cheer, but the one thing he can't do is criticize the team. And if you've read any of my articles to date, which I'm sure you have because our site is just popping. It is just popping. I've been kind of critical of the team.
Well, that's our job. He's the one to
Mm-hmm.
cheer on the team, make it more fun for the
He
viewer.
finds the inspiring storylines, and I remind you of the sacks.
And you remind him that Tommy DeVito might not have brain capacity by the end of his career.
Poor guy.
Poor guy. And it's
Hang in
not,
there.
Or the first game where no one could catch a ball.
That's true too.
like
A lot of drops in the first
a lot
game.
of people, including myself, I'm going to put this in. We criticize the quarterback so much because that's the leader of the team. That's what you're supposed to do.
That's where everybody's eyes is. And forgive the language, but that's the sexiest position. That's where all the action is. So yeah, his mistakes are going to be magnified more than anyone else's.
Versus like, because we know sports, like we know like it's not just him, it's the O-line, it's the defensive end, it's running backs, it's everybody. But people who only watch casually, they're like, oh, what did that quarterback do? Like, he should be leading his team. Or the head coach too. It's like the head coach is literally just the head coach. He does his job, he knows what he's doing, but there's like the small like assistant coaches, the line coach, it's everything.
You know, that's right, and I think that's an interesting comparison because even if the head coach does everything right, if something goes wrong, it's his fault. Why? Because he's the head coach.
It's like in the NFL when a coach gets fired, it's like, well, it's not him, it's his players. I was like, but he's in charge of his players. He's supposed to be delivering, and he hasn't.
And if you ask Tommy DeVito, why are you being sacked so much? He would never say it's because of the offensive line. He would never say it's because my wide receivers aren't getting open. He's going to take 100% of the responsibility and say, I need to do better.
Which is like commendable, like is what you're supposed to do
That's
as
what
a leader.
it's what you have to do.
Like, and you might not agree with what you're saying, and I'm not telling him he should lie. But as a leader, you're supposed to show your team what a good leader is. You're not supposed to tell them. You're supposed to show them.
Because that will lead to, whatever he's thinking, as soon as you start throwing other people under the bus, that will lead to more turmoil and chaos more than anything else.
Exactly. Well, before we end, I want to comment on your hat.
Okay. It's a great hat.
Is it?
I got it at the mall.
Which mall?
At the Galleria. Have you guys
The
even seen
Galleria.
this? Have you seen that part yet?
The Rockets.
That's pretty
I mean,
cool.
I'm not
it's
a
a
Rockets
cool
fan.
hat.
It's a cool
I
hat.
just feel like
And it's got
the
that retro
wrong hat
green.
to be working right now.
Okay.
To be
Honestly,
working
though,
with.
nothing's better than retro Spurs, like with the 3 colors. Like,
I'm gonna give you a Lakers hat to wear today.
Why?
That's alright.
Why? Because we're gonna win the championship.
okay.
You
Honestly,
might.
with the streak Miami's having, because you're most likely gonna play. Because I believe that the Lakers are gonna win the
You
Western
think
Conference.
LeBron's gonna let Jimmy Butler get a ring?
I think
it's-
Jimmy's going to take
I think
it.
it's not a matter of will he let him. It's like, can Jimmy take it? And
I just want Jimmy to get his haircut and go on home.
Don't the Lakers have to get past the Nuggets first?
Are you serious? We're going to do in less than 10 minutes. That game is about to start, and they're gonna go back to Denver in like 2 hours. Are you kidding me?
the Joker
You think
is.
we're leaving the bubble for the Denver Nuggets?
I think they're leaving Disney World for. Which honestly is such a nice place to be. They could be in worse situations. Like, I understand that like they're away from their families, and yes, they could come visit them, but it's not the same as being home. Like, they've been stuck in a hotel room for like a month, 2 months now.
Yeah, that's rough. But that was a nice touch with the NBA letting the wives and kids join them. I mean, that just had to happen.
Minus that Houston player.
That, I mean,
Y'all
I don't think we have time for
Y'all
that.
don't know how to act.
Okay.
Take y'all nowhere.
This is
Y'all
okay.
can't win.
So let me make this clear. If you're single and unmarried,
He wasn't single. He was married.
With kids.
wait a minute, he cheated?
Yes.
I
And
didn't know that.
He was married.
I didn't know he was a cheater. That's
I mean,
a different
okay,
story.
let's say this. We don't know exactly what happened, but we
I didn't know he was married with kids.
It changes things, right?
Yeah.
That's how I felt.
Well, it doesn't make it illegal, but I mean,
I know,
that's-
but it's just like
it kind of
why-
makes it hard to root for a guy, for
Yeah.
sure.
That's why I'm a Spurs fan.
Oh yeah.
You mean
We
the first year they didn't make it to the playoffs?
Well, all the Spurs are abstinent, so
Pretty much. Literally. when
unlike
you-
the Phoenix Suns, I don't know if you guys heard that story.
Yeah.
All I know is that the game about to start
Yeah.
and Lakers are about to
someone
win.
is very confident in their team. I'm confident, like I said, I'm confident that they're
I
going
don't
to win
have
the
faith
West.
in my team. What do I have?
I had faith in my team.
I'm sure
Exactly.
I'm sure you had
Exactly.
You're not in the bubble
I'm
anymore.
sure you had faith.
We were there.
I'm sure you had faith that
So
Russell
were we.
Westbrook
Final
was
8.
gonna get y'all
or
that
whatever,
ring.
Final 6. Yeah.
I'm sure y'all thought that he was gonna get that ring, but yeah, no.
Well, with that, thank you for watching. We leave Jacob in a little sad mood. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I've overstayed my welcome.
No, we've enjoyed you. You helped
We
us
have.
so much
Well,
today.
thank you. I had a lot of fun.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. Please subscribe to our channel. Please find this on sportsillustrated.com. You can follow Jacob
At J Payne Says.
on
Oh,
Twitter.
I like that.
Thank you.
And you can follow us on Pill.
Peel_it back on Instagram. I don't believe we have a Twitter yet, but you can follow
Yeah.
Maya.
On Locked In with Lockett.
Yes. The
Wow,
reason she
that's-
wasn't with us last week is because she
Went
did
to
an amazing story.
in DC.
in
on
DC.
RGB. I mean RBG. Ooh, child. I know my stuff.
And you can follow me on Twitter, Tawny_E_Davis. I always forget. For some reason, it's my own name. And on Instagram, Tawny E. Davis. Thank you for watching.
Yes, have a great night.
Bye.
Go Lakers.